As you know, we have added script to DataHub WebView version 1.4, and this adds a lot of capability to the product and to your ability to build some very interesting custom solutions. And one of the fun things that script allows us to do is now play with animation. And in this video blog, I'm going to show you how you can animate various properties of your controls. So here I have a blank page, and I'm going to just start with this. I'm going to add a couple things. I'll start with a simple button. I'm going to indicate that it is not a toggle button. I'll add a little bit of text. And I want to make sure that the pushed text is exactly the same as the normal text. So I'll just add a simple binding for that. And I want to just make that a little bit bigger. So let me just change the font size on that button. So in essence, what I want to do is animate the position of an object on the screen. And just for fun, I'm going to add a light. I'll set the light to be a little bit bigger, about 200 by 200. And I'll just move it somewhere up there. And I'm going to give the light a name of my light. And I'm not going to actually set any properties associated with the light. The key is really being able to use script to animate the position of that light. So let me come on down to this guy and notice that the push button has a click event. And I'm going to make a call to a script helper function that we have made available as part of DataHub WebView version 1.4. As you know, S#, which is our scripting engine, allows access to lots of different .NET capability. But I've also added some animation helper functions around that makes it a little bit easier to use. So you can see here this animation.ss file is on the server. And one of the things that's really important about these server-side script files is that your database administrator can add to these files. So if you've identified a number of different script routines that you really want to make available to all of your pages, just add that file to the server and all those functions become available right away. So you notice that there's two animation functions that I want to use here. A very simple WV run animation, as well as a more involved WV run animation extended, or EX. And I'll just start by showing you how we can use those. So I'm going to, in the click event, make a call to WV run animation. And there are a few different arguments that we need. Because I am animating a position, a numeric value, that is what we call a double animation, or I want to use a double animation. There's really only two different kinds of animation. Double animation is used when you're manipulating a double, as in a number, or I can also use a color animation. In this case, I actually want to use a double animation. The next thing is to indicate the handle or the target, the thing that I want to manipulate. And in this case, I want to manipulate the position of the light. And so I'm going to recognize that, first of all, the light is called my light. And secondly, the properties that I want to manipulate are the left and the top properties of this control. And it's really important when we are referring programmatically to properties of a control that we use their proper names. So actually, left, top, width, height, and locked, because these can be translated into Chinese, Japanese, or the language of the client. Ultimately, we haven't provided all that support just yet. It's coming in the next release. These can be language localized. What I really want to do is refer to the proper name of that property, and I can see the proper names here. So I can see that, for example, content X and content Y are actually the names of the properties that I want to manipulate for the position for this object. So let me just come back here again and suggest that I want to change the position of the light, content X, which is the horizontal position, and arbitrarily I'm going to have that move from somewhere down the page to someplace closer to the start of the page, so near the right hand side up to the left hand side. And the final argument is a time span, which is basically an indication of how long I want this animation to run. So for example, I have added a time span that's equivalent to 1.25 seconds. And so if this is working correctly, let me just apply that, I should be able to go into run mode, click animate, and see that sure enough, my light is moved from the from position to the to position over a span of 1.25 seconds. So that's the first thing I wanted to do. Now, I'm also going to manipulate the Y dimension, or the vertical axis, if you will, and I'm going to change the numbers around a little bit. I'll have this move from the light's current position, which is 40, down through near the bottom of the screen, and I'm going to have that happen over 1 full second. But there's a couple other things that I want to do. Let me just hit apply on that and confirm, first of all, that that does work. Yeah, sure enough, that seems to work well. But one of the things I can do with some of the more complicated animation effects is add various easing functions, they call it. And those are available through the extended version of this function. So for example, some of the additional arguments that I can choose to add will be an indication of whether I want the behavior to reverse. So that first parameter that I've specified as false is an auto reverse. Do I want it to go back to where it was? In this case, I'll say no. Second argument, I can indicate what I want the animation to do when it reaches the end of the animation. Should it hold its current position, or should the animation totally stop? I'm going to choose hold end, which is also the default. I'm also able to indicate whether I want a behavior to repeat. So in this case, I have indicated that no, it should just repeat once. Thank you. I could put any number in there I want. I could indicate infinite. There's a few other things that I could do. And this last argument is what's known as an easing function. And I actually want to create an easing function that's going to allow the ball to seemingly bounce off the bottom of the page. So I'm going to add a new variable EF, and I'm going to instantiate an instance of the .NET bounce ease function. I'm going to indicate that it should bounce 4 times, and the level of bounciness is 2. And I'll explain a little bit more about how you learn some of the details of these functions a little bit later. And I'll pass EF there as the argument that controls the bounciness. And so if this is working, we should see that the ball comes down and bounces from the right to the left. Pretty fun, pretty cool. Next thing I'm going to do is add a second animation that focuses on changing the color of the light. So let me change the text on the button, and I'll change the name of the button, always a good habit to get into, animate the color. And in this case, let me get back to my custom events. I obviously do not want to animate the position, so let me just take that code out and I'll use this one. Well, as I indicated previously, this is going to animate the color of the light. So I'm going to use a color animation as opposed to a double animation. I want it to go from red, oops, sorry about that, from red to blue. I want it to happen over the span of 1 second, and a couple other things. I'm not going to use an easing function for this one, so I'll specify no. But you know what? I do want it in this case to auto reverse. So after it animates to blue, it should go back to red again, and I want the behavior to repeat 3 times. Now, the other thing I need to indicate is the full path of the property that I want to work with. Obviously, I'm not going to manipulate content Y. Well, here's another way I can figure out, or I can save myself a little bit of typing on those properties. I'm going to select the light. I'm going to identify the property that I want to manipulate, which is this one here, primary light color, and I'm going to choose to copy a reference to that target property or parameter. And now when I come back, all I need to do is select the text where I want to put the position where I want to put that, and I'm going to paste that. And you can see that what it's done is pasted my light at primary light color. So let's see if this one is working. Hit apply on that. I'll go into run mode and I'll animate color, and sure enough it transitions from red to blue and then back again. Very cool. Last one I'll do just as a further illustration, and this isn't really doing anything different, but it is a subtle effect to really have your screen controls jump out at you, which is quite nice. Actually, now that I think of it, I'm going to use a checkbox for that instead of a button. So let me just add a checkbox to my screen here. And I'm going to call this checkbox CHK show image. Show image, and let me add an image to my screen. So there's my image, and let me just pick an image file arbitrarily, and let's pretend for the sake of argument that that image is covering the light. How's that? Open that up a bit more. So the image is now covering the light, and let me give this a name of my image. Well, obviously what I could do is set the visibility of the image rather than, obviously showing this all the time. I could simply use a binding expression. So I could choose to create a simple binding expression that binds to that checkbox and whether it's checked or not. So as I go into run mode and I click show image, obviously that checkbox, obviously the image changes its visibility appropriately. Fine, but it's not as nice a transition as perhaps what I might want. And so I'm not going to use the visible in run mode. Let me clear that and reset back to the way it was. What I actually want to do is manipulate the opacity of that image. And I'm going to start by setting the opacity to 0, which in essence means it's invisible. And of course, if I go halfway with a 0.5, you can see that it's semi-transparent. But I'll set it to 0. And I want to manipulate programmatically that opacity using an animation. So let's go back and add code for our custom event again. So we're going to do a WV run animation, and I want to use a new double animation. And again, why am I choosing a double animation? Well, because I'm manipulating a numeric value, and double is a .NET term that's used to indicate a floating point number. Whether it's real or integer, it doesn't matter, but I want to use a double animation. Once again, the property that I want to use is my image at something, and again I can't remember what that is, so I will select the image. I'll go back to opacity, and I'll just very quickly look to see what it is, and I'll notice that it's content opacity. Great, that's fine, I don't need that anymore. Of course, I could have also chosen to copy a reference to that, come back to my code, click inside here, and paste, and there's my content opacity. And I want to manipulate this from 0 to 1, and I want that to change again over a time span of a certain number of seconds, and I'll just arbitrarily, I guess we don't need that, I'll just do 1 second. I think that's good. So let me hit apply on that. I need to do the opposite here as well. So that was when the user clicks the checkbox. I also need to do the opposite when the user unclicks or clears the checkbox, and I'll just change the opacity from 1 to 0. And so when I go into run mode, I've got my position with my bounciness. I can change the color of my ball, and I can choose to fade in or fade out the overlapping image. So some very interesting effects can be accomplished using script and .NET animation. To learn more about animation in Silverlight, you can just use Microsoft's online references. So I'm going to search for a Silverlight animation overview, and I'm going to click that link. And you can see there's a lot of information here about how to make elements fade in and fade out and all kinds of stuff, including the easing functions that we saw. You'll recall that we used the bounce ease function for our light, and you can see that it's got properties. The ones that I had used was bounces and bounciness. So all of that information is available online via a search of Silverlight Animation Overview.